Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here to sift through those, sometimes complex sources and pull out the essentials for you. And today, it's a really focused look. We're diving into the story of Hannah from the first couple of chapters of the book of Samuel.
Right, a story that seems, on the surface, pretty straightforward. A mother's plea.
Exactly. But we're concentrating entirely on the traditional rabbinic view, how they saw Hannah, not just as a mother, but as, well, the foundational model for tefilloh, for Jewish prayer.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How rabbinic tradition takes this narrative and expands it. She becomes the blueprint for how millions actually pray. It's quite a transformation.
That's our mission today, exploring how the sages did that, how they turned her personal moment into halakha, into law, and spiritual example. Her pain didn't just lead to a son.
No, it codified the central prayer, the Amidah.
It really elevated the personal experience, didn't it? Almost above the formal temple ritual of the time.
That's a huge point.
Hmm.
Her actions at Shiloh arguably shift the focus of worship from the public altar, to a private heart.
A massive shift. Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with something pretty surprising. The idea that major prayer laws come straight from just a few words describing Hannah praying in 1 Samuel 1, verse 13.
Yeah. That verse is incredibly dense in the rabbinic reading. It's really a classic example of their method taking one descriptive moment and extracting a whole legal framework.
And the main discussion is in the Talmud.
Yes, Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Barakot. That's where the sages really dissect Hannah's actions at Shiloh, pulling out, believe it or not, 4 fundamental laws of prayer.
4 laws from one verse. Okay, what's the first one they derive?
It all starts with kavonoh, focused intention. The verse says, now Hannah was speaking in her heart.
So not just reciting words, but really meaning them, directing your thoughts.
Precisely. The sages emphasize that prayer has to be this inward act of concentration.
Yeah.
You can't just be mouthing syllables. Your heart, your mind, they have to be fully engaged, directed towards God. It makes inner sincerity the absolute baseline.
But then it's interesting because if the heart is the main thing, why not just think the prayer? The next part of the verse seems to push back against that. It says, only her lips moved.
Exactly. And that's the brilliance, really. It stops prayer from becoming just, silent meditation, completely internal. This gives us the second law, articulation.
You have to actually form the words.
Yes, with your lips.
Yeah.
It bridges that gap between just thinking and the physical act of speaking. Even if no sound comes out, it demands a certain physical presence and engagement.
Which leads directly, I suppose, to the third point, the one most people probably associate with the Amidah prayer, that signature quietness. The verse ends, but her voice was not heard.
That's it.
Yeah.
The direct source for the halakhic, the silent prayer. It's why, millions of Jews stand often shoulder to shoulder in synagogue 3 times a day and recite these blessings quietly, under their breath.
Emulating Hannah.
Directly emulating Hannah. It mandates this kind of personal, intimate space with God, even in a public setting.
So we've got concentration, articulation with the lips, and silence. What's the fourth law? It comes from a different angle, doesn't it? From Eli, the high priest.
It does, and it's almost ironic. Eli sees her praying, like this, lips moving, no sound, and he misinterprets it completely. He thinks she's drunk.
Right, he accuses her.
And from his mistake, the rabbis derive the 4th critical law, sobriety. The reasoning is, if someone praying with such intense, silent fervor could possibly be mistaken for being drunk.
Then genuine drunkenness is obviously incompatible with prayer.
Absolutely. It underlines the need for total mental and spiritual clarity. So the law becomes like someone who is intoxicated is forbidden to pray the Amidah. Drunkenness just destroys the required kavonoh, that focused reverence Hannah modeled.
It's just incredible. One sentence describing a woman's personal anguish becomes this detailed instruction manual for daily spiritual practice.
It really is.
But, okay, that's the halakha, the legal side. What about the Agadah, the narrative, the storytelling tradition? The rabbis didn't just see her as a source of law, they really amped up the drama, especially in her confrontation with Eli. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, definitely. That confrontation is it's a major scene in the rabbinic imagination.
Yeah.
So Eli, head priest at Shiloh, basically tells her to sober up, put away your wine. 1 Samuel 1.42.
And her reply in the text seems respectful enough. No, my lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. 1.50.
On the surface, yes. A polite denial. But the sages, they look closer, especially at the Hebrew.
They always do.
They take her first words, no, my lord, luadoni, and they hear something else. They hear a slight shift in pronunciation, or perhaps intention, la, deny, meaning, no, you are not a lord. Or maybe There is no judgment here. It's not deference. It's a rebuke. A powerful one.
Wow. So this woman in deep personal distress is basically telling the high priest, the top religious authority, that he's completely misjudged the situation, that he lacks spiritual insight.
That's exactly how they read it. She's implying he doesn't have the Shekinah, the Holy Spirit, or divine insight if he could make such a crass mistake, suspecting piety for drunkenness. She's saying, you have no mastery here in this spiritual moment.
Why were the rabbis so keen on this interpretation? It paints the priesthood in a pretty poor light and elevates this individual woman so highly. Was it about justifying their own post-temple authority, maybe? Focused on prayer and study over ritual?
That's certainly part of the context. Post-temple destruction, the rabbis were emphasizing personal piety, prayer, study. So showing that true spiritual connection isn't guaranteed by title, but comes from genuine devotion like Hannah's that fits.
It makes her insight seem more potent than his position.
Exactly. Her authentic, raw prayer gives her more spiritual clarity than the high priest, who seems, well, perhaps a bit spiritually complacent or blind in that moment.
But still, reading Lo-Adoni as Lo-Adon feels like a big interpretive leap. How did they justify using it this way?
Well, they don't just leave it as a dramatic flourish. They turn it into a practical, ethical teaching. Her bold response becomes the proof text for a moral obligation.
It is.
That if you are unjustly suspected of something wrong, especially something impious, you have a duty to speak up, to clear your name. You can't just let the suspicion stand.
So Hannah becomes a model of courage, spiritual self-assertion.
Precisely. She defends the purity of her heart and her actions against institutional judgment. It's a powerful lesson about not just being pious, but having the courage to stand by your piety.
Which then brings us to the deepest question, maybe the most theologically challenging one. Why was she suffering so much to begin with? The text is blunt. The Lord had closed her womb. It wasn't accidental.
And this is where rabbinic theology offers a really profound and perhaps difficult perspective. The Talmud doesn't shy away from it. It states quite directly that God desired Hannah's prayer.
Meaning he caused her barrenness because he wanted her to pray.
That's the assertion. It reframes her suffering completely. It's not a punishment for some unknown sin. Instead, it's presented as, well, almost like a loving challenge from God.
A challenge designed to elicit a certain kind of response.
Yes. The idea, applied not just to Hannah but also to figures like Sarah and Rachel, the matriarchs, is that sometimes God withholds a blessing from the righteous, specifically because he longs to hear their voice in prayer. The kind of earnest, heartfelt, desperate prayer that only comes out of genuine struggle.
If she'd had children easily, maybe her prayers would have been more routine, less intense.
That seems to be the implication. Her suffering was the catalyst needed to produce the kind of prayer God desired. It's a tough concept, but it radically reorients how one might view suffering.
It suggests that sometimes deep pain isn't a sign of God's absence, but maybe a sign of his intense focus, his desire for connection.
Exactly, and the Jerusalem Talmud connects this directly back to her words. Remember, I have poured out my soul before the Lord. That phrase becomes key.
Because the suffering caused that pouring out.
Yes. Her barrenness wasn't incidental. It was the very thing that generated that level of raw sincerity. An authentic outpouring of the soul, completely vulnerable, no pretense, no formality. The trial was necessary for the prayer to reach that peak.
So her personal crisis wasn't just personal, it had a purpose. To create this perfect model of prayer.
And through that perfect prayer, to bring forth what the nation needed.
Which was Samuel, not just any son.
Not at all. Samuel, the first major prophet since Moses, the anointer of kings, the figure who oversees the transition to monarchy. Hannah's utterly sincere, heart-wrenching prayer becomes the spiritual engine driving national destiny.
Okay, so let's try to bring these threads together. We have Hannah, the lawgiver for prayer, Hannah, the assertive defender of her piety, and Hannah, the theologian whose suffering leads to divine intimacy. What's the overarching legacy here?
It's really comprehensive. Halakhically, she sets the rules. Silence, intention, sobriety, articulation. Morally, she's the exemplar of spiritual courage, standing up for truth even against authority. And theologically, her story is this powerful testament to how profound suffering can be understood not just as pain, but as a pathway, a divinely intended path to deeper connection with God and even world-changing impact.
And it doesn't stop there, does it? Her legacy pushes into actual prophecy, too. The rabbis count her among the prophetesses of Israel.
Yes, based largely on her song in 1 Samuel chapter 2. That song is extraordinary.
Why, particularly?
Well, when she speaks about God giving power to his king
Mm-hmm.
and exalting his anointed Meshiko, The word for Messiah, there is no king in Israel yet.
Ah, so it's foresight.
For the sages, absolutely.
Yeah.
It proves she wasn't just celebrating her son, she was seeing the future, the rise of David, the concept of the monarchy, and even hints of the ultimate messianic era.
And that connection carries right through to today, liturgically. Her story is read on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year.
As the Haftarah, the prophetic portion, on the first day, it's incredibly poignant.
Why that specific placement?
Think about it. The community stands at the start of a new year, praying for remembrance, for blessings, for redemption. And they read the story of Hannah, the woman God remembered. It's a powerful message of hope. Just as God heard and answered Hannah in her distress, so too may God remember and answer the community today.
It's really striking when you put it all together. These huge shifts in Israelite history, the end of the era of judges, the start of prophecy and monarchy, they don't originate from some grand political strategy or priestly decree.
No. They start with the quiet, desperate, utterly sincere prayer of one woman, alone with her pain and her God.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What personal act of faith, however small it seems, however quiet, what might you be doing right now that could ripple outwards, that could potentially change the destiny of your own world?